Emma Collins drove through the quiet Vermont countryside with the windows slightly open, letting the cool autumn wind brush against her face. The air smelled like pine and rain, and for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. She had left Boston early that morning, her suitcase half packed and her heart half broken. Her 5-year relationship had ended suddenly, and the silence in her apartment had been unbearable. So she booked a weekend at a small lakeside Ina place where she could think, sleep, and maybe remember who she was before everything fell apart when she arrived. The inn looked exactly as she hoped. Old wooden walls, a stone path lined with yellow leaves, and a porch swing that creaked softly in the wind. Inside, the smell of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. The woman at the front desk smiled warmly, handed her a brass key labeled Room 14, and said, "You'll love it. The view of the lake is beautiful this time of year." Emma thanked her, trying to hide how exhausted she felt. Her heart still carried the weight of goodbyes she hadn't wanted to say. All she wanted now was quiet. No phone calls, no messages. No reminders of what had ended. She walked up the narrow staircase, her boots creaking on the wooden steps. Room 14 was at the end of the hall. When she opened the door, she smiled for the first time that week. The room was small but warm, with soft yellow curtains, a fireplace, and a balcony that looked out over the silver water below. She set her bag on the bed and let out a long breath. For a moment, she believed peace might actually find her here. Emma took off her coat and sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers brushing against the soft quilt. She looked around and whispered to herself, "Just me." It was supposed to be her weekend, her room, her silence, her chance to start again. But before she could even unpack, the door behind her opened. Emma turned, startled, as 2 people stepped in, both holding suitcases and looking just as surprised as she was. "Wait, what?" said the man, blinking at her. Emma froze. She knew that voice. Her heart gave a painful twist. "Daniel?" she whispered. He stared at her, stunned. "Emma, what are you doing here?" Before she could answer, the young woman beside him, smiling, confused, and clearly unaware of the tension, spoke up. I'm Sophie. My brother and I were just checking in. This is our room." Emma's eyes widened. There must be a mistake. "This is room 14. I just checked in." Sophie glanced at Daniel, then at the paper in her hand. The front desk said Room 14 too. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The awkwardness filled the air like static. Emma's chest tightened. Of all the people in the world to share a room with, it had to be him, Daniel Hayes, her ex-boyfriend's best friend. The man who had once been like family, and who had disappeared from her life when the relationship ended. Daniel sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "This is weird." "That's one word for it," Emma said softly. Sophie, trying to break the tension, gave a nervous laugh. "Maybe the inn messed up the booking. I'll call the front desk." She stepped into the hallway, leaving Emma and Daniel alone for the first time in over a year. The silence was heavy. Emma's heart beat faster than she wanted it to. He looked older, tired, maybe, but still had that calm expression she used to trust so easily. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said finally. "I didn't either." She gave a small, dry laugh. "Guess we both needed an escape." Sophie returned a minute later. "Bad news. They're completely full because of the photography festival in town. No other rooms available until Monday." Emma blinked. "So, what do we do?" Sophie shrugged. "The manager said you could share. They'll give you a discount." Daniel frowned. "That's ridiculous. It's one bed." "There's a couch," Emma said quietly. He looked at her, uncertain, then nodded slowly. "Fine, I'll take the couch." It wasn't ideal, but none of them wanted to drive hours in the dark. So they agreed to stay for one night, at least. Sophie took the armchair by the fireplace. Daniel settled on the couch, and Emma sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to think about how strange this was. As the evening went on, the awkwardness softened a little. They talked about the storm that was supposed to hit that night, about the festival in town, about anything except the past. Sophie's bright energy filled the room, and Emma found herself laughing once or twice. Daniel mostly listened, quiet but warm, the same way he'd always been. Later, when Sophie went to shower, Daniel looked at Emma and said, "I'm sorry. I know this is uncomfortable." She met his eyes. "It's fine. It's just one night." But deep down, she knew it wasn't fine. Sitting across from him after all that time brought back memories she'd tried to bury late-night talks by the river. Game nights that lasted until morning, how he'd always been the calm in every storm. And now here he was, in the same room again. Just when she'd sworn to close that part of her life for good. The clock ticked softly. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the windows. Emma stood by the balcony and watched the lake shimmer under the gray sky. Daniel moved to the fireplace, tossing another log onto the flames. The orange glow lit his face, and for a second, their eyes met. Neither spoke. When Sophie came back, cheerful as ever, the quiet broke. They all got ready for bed, pretending it wasn't strange to be sharing one room. Daniel stretched out on the couch, Sophie curled up with a blanket. And Emma turned off the lamp. In the darkness, she listened to the rain and the soft breathing of the two people she hadn't expected to see again. Her heart ached, but not in the same way it had a few days ago. This ache was quieter, deeper, something like confusion. Or maybe hope. As she closed her eyes, one thought circled in her mind. Maybe this room isn't just for me after all. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the lake shimmered faintly in the storm's light. Somewhere inside that old inn, 3 people lay awake, each of them, wondering how one simple booking mistake could bring so many old feelings rushing back. And though Emma didn't know it yet, this unexpected night would change everything she thought she knew about endings and beginnings. The morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting soft lines across the wooden floor. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of laughter from the kitchen downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Daniel asleep on the couch, his arm over his eyes, and Sophie sitting near the window, sipping tea with a book in her hand. Everything that happened last night came rushing back. The booking mistake, the awkward silence, the storm that had raged outside while 3 near strangers shared one small room. Morning. Sophie said brightly, closing her book. "I ordered breakfast downstairs. Hope you like pancakes." Emma smiled, still half asleep. "That sounds perfect." Daniel stirred, sitting up with a sleepy grin. "Do I smell coffee or am I dreaming?" Sophie laughed. "Both. Come on, sleepyhead. Breakfast is waiting." The tension from the night before seemed lighter now. They made their way to the inn's small cafe, where the smell of butter and maple syrup filled the air. The 3 of them sat by the window overlooking the lake. Outside, the storm had passed and sunlight danced over the water. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt almost calm. Sophie talked about her job at a design studio in Chicago, her plans to photograph the festival, and her dream of publishing a travel blog someday. Daniel listened quietly, adding small comments here and there. Emma found herself smiling at their sibling banter, gentle teasing. Small laughter, easy warmth. "You're quiet," Daniel said. Glancing at her, "I forgot what peaceful mornings feel like." Emma replied softly. He gave a small smile. "You needed one." Their eyes met for a brief second, just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Emma quickly looked away, focusing on the lake outside. She didn't want to feel anything, not after everything that had happened. But with Daniel, emotions always came to Isley. After breakfast, they decided to walk into town together. The main street was alive with people holding cameras, vendors selling coffee, and children chasing each other between stalls. The air smelled like roasted nuts and cinnamon. Sophie was thrilled, snapping pictures of everything. Daniel and Emma followed behind, keeping a comfortable distance. "This town's changed," Daniel said, looking around. "Used to be quieter," Emma smiled. "Maybe it's a good thing. Sometimes a little noise helps you forget what's missing." He nodded thoughtfully. "Or reminds you of what you actually want." His words lingered. Emma didn't know what to say, so she turned toward a vendor selling handmade candles. The man handed her one that smelled like lavender and pine. She held it to her chest and smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was running from her feelings. When they returned to the inn later that afternoon, manager apologized again for the room mix-up. "We'll try to find a solution by tomorrow," he said kindly. "Maybe someone will check out early." Emma thanked him, though she wasn't sure how she felt about leaving now. The strange comfort of their shared space had started to feel familiar. That evening, the three of them gathered by the fireplace. Sophie showed them photos from her camera, Daniel laughing as a dog jumped on him. Emma staring at the lake with her hair caught in the wind. "You two look perfect," Sophie teased, "like a movie poster." Emma's cheeks warmed. "Don't start." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "She always says that about everyone." Sophie smirked. "Not everyone. Just people who look like they're meant to be in the same story." The room fell quiet for a second. Emma looked down, pretending to adjust the blanket on her lap. Daniel's gaze lingered on her, but neither spoke. Later that night, Sophie went out to meet a group of photographers she'd befriended at the festival. That left Emma and Daniel alone in the room for the first time. The fire crackled softly. The air between them was calm, but filled with a quiet awareness. "You seem better today," he said gently. "I think this place helps," she replied. "It's simple. No memories here." Daniel looked into the fire. "You deserve peace, Emma. You always did." She turned toward him. "I didn't expect to find it like this, sharing a room with you and your sister." He smiled faintly. "Life's funny that way." The rain started again outside, a soft drizzle tapping the windows. Emma stood and went to the balcony. The lake reflected the lights from the nearby cabins, a mirror of gold and gray. She heard Daniel's footsteps behind her and felt his presence close. "You really haven't talked to him since the breakup?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No. He was angry at me for understanding you too much." Emma looked at him, surprised. "Understanding me?" Daniel met her eyes. "I knew why you left long before you said it. You were holding everything together by yourself. You needed to breathe." Throat tightened. No one had ever said it so simply. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "Daniel," she began, but before she could continue, Sophie's voice echoed from downstairs. "I'm back, and I brought hot chocolate." The moment broke, soft but incomplete. Daniel stepped back, smiling as Sophie appeared in the doorway, dripping from the rain, holding 3 steaming cups. "It's freezing out there," she said, handing one to Emma. "You two look like you were talking about something serious." Emma smiled quickly. "Just catching up." Sophie grinned, not noticing the tension. "Well, tomorrow I'm dragging both of you to the festival." "You need to live a little." Daniel laughed. "Yes, ma'am." The night passed with stories and laughter. Sophie fell asleep first, her head resting on a pillow near the fireplace. Daniel dozed off on the couch again. Emma lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The crackle of the fire was the only sound left. She couldn't sleep. Her heart felt full of questions she didn't want to ask. Why did it still feel so easy to talk to him? Why did his voice still calm her the way it used to? She had come here to heal. Not to feel something new, but maybe healing and feeling weren't so different after all. Before closing her eyes, she glanced at Daniel one last time. His face looked peaceful in the dim firelight, the same calm expression that once made her feel safe. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "Maybe this isn't such a mistake." Outside, the rain stopped. The lake shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and for the first time since her heartbreak, Emma didn't feel alone. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure: something had shifted. The silence she once feared was now filled with warmth, laughter, and the soft echo of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The storm hit just after sunset. The wind howled through the trees and thunder rolled over the lake like distant drums. Power flickered twice before the lights finally went out, leaving only the soft glow of the fireplace and a few candles. Sophie had lit before heading to the lobby to check on the power situation. Emma and Daniel were left alone in the quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavier than words. Daniel added another log to the fire. "Well," he said, half smiling, "looks like we're trapped for a while." Emma sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. "Could be worse," she murmured. "At least we have warmth." He glanced at her. "And company." She turned toward him, caught off guard by the softness in his voice. The firelight flickered across his face, making his eyes seem deeper, more open. She could feel her heartbeat quicken. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had come here to get away from everything, especially feeling she couldn't trust Dot to break the tension. She said, "Remember that summer barbecue at Lakewood Park? You spent an hour trying to fix the grill." Daniel laughed. "And it still didn't work." "You blamed the wind," she teased. He grinned. "It was windy." The laughter came easily, the way it used to before everything changed. But when the laughter faded, a quiet stillness settled again, gentile, but full of meaning. Daniel leaned back against the couch, his tone calm. "I never told you this, but that day I knew you weren't okay. You kept smiling, but your eyes looked tired. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but he was there. I didn't think it was my place." Emma's chest tightened. "It wasn't anyone's place. I kept pretending I was fine so no one would ask." He nodded slowly. "I figured, I just wish I'd done something anyway." His honesty made her throat ache. "You always cared too much," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but some people are worth caring about." The words lingered between them, heavier than the thunder outside. Emma looked away, her breath shaky. She didn't want to misread the moment. But there was something in his voice that made her heart stumble. "I don't want to make this complicated." She said softly, "Complicated things can still be true." Daniel replied. She didn't know how to answer. For a few seconds, all she could hear was the rain hitting the roof and the fire popping in the hearth. He stood and walked closer, stopping a few steps away. "I know you didn't expect to see me here," he said quietly. "And I didn't expect to see you either. But maybe we were supposed to. Maybe this mix-up isn't just an accident." Emma looked up at him. His tone wasn't pushy or bold. It was gentle, like someone speaking a truth they'd held in for too long. "Daniel," she began, but before she could finish, the door opened. Sophie stepped inside, her coat soaked from the rain, holding her phone with a worried expression. "Emma," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this." Emma frowned. "What's wrong?" Sophie handed her the phone. On the screen was a message from an unknown number, but Emma recognized it immediately. It was from her ex. "Tell Daniel to stay away from her. She's not your problem." The words hit her like a slap. Her stomach turned, and she felt heat rush to her cheeks. Daniel read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. "He texted you that?" Sophie nodded. "He got my number from a friend. Said he wanted to warn me." Emma felt anger and embarrassment mix inside her. "I can't believe he's still trying to control who I talk to." Daniel's voice was low. "He doesn't get to decide that." But Emma was already retreating inside herself, her mind spinning. Seeing that message brought back every memory she'd tried to bury the arguments. The guilt, the feeling of always being blamed for wanting space. She had come here to escape all that, and now it had found her again. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "He always does this," she whispered. "Every time I start to feel okay, he finds a way to pull me back." Daniel crouched down in front of her. "You don't owe him anything anymore?" "I know," she said, though her voice sounded unsure. Sophie looked between them, worried. "I'll talk to the manager about blocking that number. Don't let this ruin your night." Emma managed a small smile. "Thanks, Sophie." Sophie gave her a reassuring nod and stepped out again to speak with the staff. The moment she left, the silence returned sharper this time. Filled with emotion, neither could hide anymore. Daniel sat beside her. "I shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "Not because I don't want to be here, but because I didn't realize how hard this would be for you." Emma shook her head. "It's not your fault. I just I don't know how to feel right now. He looked at her with steady eyes. Then feel whatever you need to. Don't filter it. For the first time in a long while, Emma let herself do exactly that. She let the tears fall silent, small but honest. Daniel didn't say anything. He just sat beside her, close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. After a while, she spoke quietly. Do you ever wonder how we end up in the same places as the people we try to avoid? Daniel smiled softly. Maybe it's because there's something left unsaid. She looked at him then, really looked at the man who had been a quiet shadow through so many chapters of her life. Her voice trembled. You've always been kind to me, even when you didn't have to be. I wanted to be, he said simply. You deserved kindness. You still do. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The firelight flickered between them, its warm and golden dot. Then Sophie's voice echoed faintly from outside, breaking the spell. Power's back on. The lights flickered to life again, bright and sharp after the candlelight. Emma blinked, almost wishing they'd stayed in the dark a little longer. Daniel stood, giving her a small, careful smile. We should get some rest. It's been a long night. She nodded. Yeah, long, but important. As they turned in for the night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The message from her ex still stung, but Daniel's words had softened the blow. There was truth in his voice, something real that reached past the hurt. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew one thing for certain: something between them had changed. Outside, the storm began to fade. The thunder rolled away into silence, leaving behind only the soft sound of rain against the glass. Emma closed her eyes, her heart still unsteady. But for the first time in months, not afraid of what might come next. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this night would not be forgotten. It was the night she stopped running from her past and started listening to the quiet, steady voice that had always been there, waiting. The storm was gone by morning, leaving the lake calm and the sky painted in soft gold. The air smelled fresh, washed clean by the rain. Emma woke early, her thoughts still tangled from the night before. She sat up slowly, noticing the soft hum of the inn returning to life, voices in the hallway, the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen, and the comforting crackle of the fire that had burned through the night. Daniel was already awake, standing by the balcony with a mug of coffee in his hand. The light touched his face, outlining the quiet strength in his expression. For a moment, Emma just watched him. After everything that had happened, the storm, the message, the memories, it felt strange to see peace in his eyes. He turned when he heard her move. Morning, he said softly. Morning, she replied, her voice still sleepy. Did you sleep at all? He smiled faintly. A little. Mostly just thought about things. Emma pushed back the blanket and stood beside him, looking out at the lake. The water was still, reflecting the tall trees like glass. It's beautiful, she said. Yeah, he whispered. It is. But his tone carried something more, something quiet, honest, and hard to ignore. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't feel awkward anymore. There was understanding between them now, unspoken but real. Emma knew they both felt the same weight of what had happened, the text message, the old wounds, the unplanned closeness that had grown stronger with every passing hour. Finally, she said, I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to fall apart. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to apologize for feeling something. You've been holding everything in for too long. She looked down, her fingers brushing the wooden balcony rail. It's just hard to believe I still let him get to me. After everything, I thought I was stronger than that. You are, Daniel said gently. But strength isn't about never breaking. It's about standing up again when you do. His words were simple, but they hit deep. Emma felt her chest tighten with something that wasn't sadness this time, something closer to warmth. Sophie came in a few minutes later, cheerful and full of morning energy. Good news, she said, holding up her phone. The inn found an extra room. A couple checked out early. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Oh, Daniel nodded slowly. That's great. Sophie didn't notice the hesitation in their voices. I figured one of you could move over there today. No more sharing." Emma forced a small smile. "Right? That's good." For some reason, the thought of leaving room 14 didn't feel like relief. It felt like losing something she hadn't realized she needed. After breakfast, Sophie left to explore the festival again, leaving Emma and Daniel alone once more. The silence between them was softer now, filled with things neither wanted to say out loud. Daniel packed his things quietly. "I'll take the new room," he said finally. "You should stay here. You booked it first." Emma nodded but didn't move. "You don't have to go right now." He looked at her, his eyes steady but kind. "If I stay, I'm afraid I'll say something I shouldn't." Her heart skipped. "Like what?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Like how I've thought about you more than I should have these past months. How seeing you here made me realize that maybe what I felt before wasn't just friendship." Emma froze. She had imagined those words before, in another lifetime, but hearing them now felt different. "More real, more dangerous, Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't, I know," he said quickly. "You just got out of something painful. The last thing you need is someone stepping in to fill the silence." She looked at him, her chest aching. "That's not what this is." He smiled sadly. "I know it's not. That's what scares me." The truth hung between them, raw and gentle at once. The world outside felt still, as if it was waiting for them to decide what came next. Emma took a deep breath. "You've always had this way of showing up when I need someone, even when I don't say it out loud." Daniel looked at her, his voice quiet. "Maybe I just never stopped caring." She felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally hearing the truth. She wanted to reach out to tell him she cared too, but something inside her whispered to wait, to let time do what rushing never could. Instead, she smiled softly. "Thank you for being here, Daniel." "For not walking away." He nodded, returning the smile. "Always." He gathered his bag, pausing by the door. "I'll be next door if you need anything. But I think you'll be okay now." Emma watched him leave, the quiet click of the door echoing in her chest. The room felt bigger, suddenly emptier, yet filled with something beautiful she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Later that afternoon, she walked down to the lake alone. The sun shimmered on the surface, the air cool against her skin. She stood at the edge of the dock, watching the gentle ripples move outward, like the way her life seemed to be slowly expanding again. She thought about everything: the heartbreak that brought her here, the mistake that put Daniel in her room, the storm that forced them to talk, and the honesty that had followed. Somehow, it all made sense now. Every wrong turn had led her to this quiet moment of understanding. Sophie returned just before sunset, camera in hand, her smile bright. "You look lighter," she said. "Did something happen?" Emma laughed softly. Maybe something started. They spent the evening together by the fire, sharing stories and hot chocolate. Daniel joined them later, his expression relaxed, his voice calm. There was no awkwardness anymore, just quiet warmth. Like everyone had found their place in the same story. As night fell, Emma stepped out to the balcony one last time. The lake reflected the moonlight like silver glass, and a soft wind moved through the trees. Daniel appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She smiled. "Not yet. I'm thinking too much about how sometimes the wrong reservation can lead to the right people." He chuckled quietly. "That sounds like something Sophie would write on her travel blog." Emma laughed, then looked at him, her expression gentle. "I don't know what happens next, but I'm glad it's you I'm sharing this part of the story with." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then let's not rush it. Whatever this is, let it grow at its own pace." She nodded, feeling calm for the first time in months. The pain, the confusion, even the loneliness, they all seemed smaller now, replaced by something simple and real. They stood together, watching the moon reflect on the lake, the silence between them filled with quiet hope. It wasn't a grand ending or a perfect beginning, just a moment of peace between 2 hearts that had finally found a reason to stop running. And as Emma looked out over the still water, She smiled to herself. Maybe the room hadn't been meant just for her. Maybe it was meant to bring three people together to heal, to forgive, and to remind her that even after the storm, it's always a morning worth waking up to.